record.
My family was very vocal and loud, and if you were mad, you said it. And Emerson's family, everyone could be hurt, but nobody says a word.
You don't talk about it until you explode.
It's a very open platform in our family, so we have had a lot of visitors.
And that was very foreign to me. We didn't have people coming in and out of our homes. We just dealt with one another, and sometimes we didn't want to deal with one another.
My family quite loud, we talk about everything, and Neil's family much quieter.
My family, they're quite posh, and yours aren't.
I come out of a German background. What can I say? It's very
precise.
Yeah, it was a very precise kind of upbringing.
I don't know how I got in, but I did.
Whatever happens, we all join together and spend time together, sit and chat, laugh.
They have a nice culture about the family, and if somebody comes to their house and they are just about leaving, you would see the entire family walk up through to the door, stand outside the gate, and keep waving their hands all the way till they make the turn at the end of the road. I said, wow man, how would you do that? For us, we say, hey, bye, and then that's it. The person goes, we don't even know whether somebody opens the gate for them.
Her family, I'd go over and everyone's screaming and telling each other how they feel, and I was like, this is crazy.
The subject of this session is the impact of family, past and present. Now, we're very aware that every couple will have a unique and different situation.
And for some people, the support you receive from your family is good and helpful in building a strong marriage. For others, it's more complicated and can even be damaging.
And these relationships are always a work in progress. And while Nikki and I have found great support from our wider family over the years, we've also had our fair share of tensions and difficulties. I want to tell you about a small but a very real area of tension in the early years for me with my mother-in-law. And it was to do with the clothes we dressed our children in when they were little.
My mother had very strong views about all sorts of things and always said exactly what she thought, including how she thought our children should be dressed.
Now, I definitely took a very relaxed approach, dressing them in jeans and T-shirts most of the time, whereas my mother-in-law's approach was much more traditional. I remember her once making our daughter a bright red pinafore dress and then matching corduroy shorts for our boys, which really wasn't my style. She expected them to wear these at every big family occasion, which I found really difficult. It was really kind of her to make them lots of clothes, but it did cause tension, and not only between me and my mother-in-law, but also between me and Nikki, because she tried to get Nikki to take her side. Now, it may seem like a small thing, but I really had to work hard at not letting it affect Nikki and my relationship, because I felt she was driving a wedge between us and was trying to exert control.
We learnt a lot in those early years of our marriage about working out our own way of doing things and sticking together on what we'd decided. Family background plays a big part in marriage. Every couple needs to be aware of what they're bringing into their marriage from their upbringing, as we may have had very different experiences and very different expectations as a result about all sorts of things.
One of the big differences between our families was how they each dealt with conflict. In my family, as I was growing up, everyone said exactly what they thought, generally quite loudly, and didn't worry if it was different to what anyone else in the family was thinking. And if someone was upset, everyone knew about it. Calm, rational debate didn't really feature in my family.
Whereas in my family, most of us might well not say what we thought for fear of upsetting someone else. So a lot was left unsaid, and that could lead to one of us brooding on something and the issue not being properly aired.
So when we were first married, I just continued in the mode I was used to, saying exactly what I thought the moment I thought it. And it never occurred to me that Nikki might feel hurt and not tell me what he felt. I was so used to everything being out in the open, things being thrashed out, and if people got upset, that was normal, and it would blow over sooner or later.
Meanwhile, I was having to get used to a very different level of direct and frank discussion, which at first I found quite disconcerting. Actually, both of our families' ways of resolving disagreements had their strengths and weaknesses, and we realised we had to work out our own way of bringing things out into the open at the right moment, and in a way that wasn't going to lead to me going silent like the hedgehog, or Scylla charging like the rhino.
Parents set the example of how a marriage should be.
Your upbringing, right? So it sort of affects your outlook on life.
So if you're not used to seeing a happy marriage, I do think it makes you less inclined to chase that.
She was raised a certain way or had different experiences than I, and adapting to that newness has sometimes been a sticking point for us.
Family values and family backgrounds have made a very big impact.
I think parents or in-laws can affect marriage, mostly I think in decision making. Everybody wants to give their input. Everybody thinks that they know best. I don't think that's always the case.
Boundaries. Oh, that was a good word, girl. Boundaries.
We decided when we got married is whatever happens between us, it stays between us. Her mother complains about it still.
We are a unit and we don't want anything to come as a wedge between us.
As we look at this subject of family, we're going to start by looking at the profound change that should take place in our relationship with our parent or parents or whoever were our main caregivers as we grew up. The change from being a child and completely dependent upon them to a healthy independence as an adult. And even though we may be very involved in each other's lives, we make our own decisions together with our partner. It's in this sense that in marriage, we've left our family of origin, even if we're still living in the same house, and created a new family unit. As the verse in Genesis 2 says, "For this reason a man and a woman will leave their father and mother and be united to each other."
The importance of leaving our parents can easily be missed, particularly in those parts of the world where people who are getting married have generally moved out of their parental homes some years earlier. Yet the significance of leaving is not so much the physical move as the psychological and emotional one.
It can be helpful to think in terms of the home and the family we were born into being our centre of gravity, from which we moved out in ever-widening circles of exploration and independence. But the centre remained the home to which we initially had to return, and to which later we may have chosen to return when we needed comfort or advice or money was short or the laundry had piled up. The home where we grew up can often remain the primary place we look to for direction and security. After marriage, this has to change. We create a new unit, a new decision-making structure, a new centre of gravity. Creating this new centre doesn't mean cutting ourselves off from our parents or parents-in-law or not loving and respecting them. But our highest commitment and loyalty must now be to each other. We now, as a couple, relate to and care for our parents, and we may need to help them relate to us as a couple.
Boundaries are not just about physical space. Boundaries are primarily a psychological and interpersonal construct. You can be in a phone booth and still have good boundaries. So a lot of times where you see this boundary problem played out is in control and manipulation, which is really when the desires of, the parents are stepping over into trying to get the couple to steer their direction of their relationship. One of the important things to remember is a couple is a couple. You've really become this one unit, even though you're still two individuals. So it's really important that if you're going to present a united front, that you actually have one. It's hard to present something you don't possess. And so get together. Now, here's where a lot of times real growth happens with one of the spouses, because you're trying to say, we need to have more time away from your parents, for example, if you're talking to your spouse. Well, what if the other one's kind of still afraid of their parents? So now you got a situation where spouses can help each other to grow and say, you know what, I really need to be first in your life. And sometimes I feel like your mother is, or sometimes I feel like your father is. So can we talk about how we can be first and what our marriage needs? And then I'll be glad to stand with you when we present that. I can't do that when I feel like, we're not on the same page.
When our first child came, his parents began to visit a little bit more frequently than I had anticipated.
I thought that my mom, being a nurse, would have just come in and helped out with the baby.
It was that intimacy that they shared as a family that I felt intruded into my family unit. And I wasn't, at that point in my life, I wasn't ready for it.
So I had to gently tell Mom, like, maybe you just let Karen deal with it. I think it should be fine.
I did feel from John's family that I didn't quite measure up. I mean, like, I would hang up clothes on the clothesline and his mother would come out and take them down and hang them up the right way. That kind of thing. I mean, they were little things, but they were hurtful things.
I tried to communicate with my mother and try to help her understand that, Sally was coming from a very different place.
I think in her elder years, she kind of mellowed, and I really grew to love her.
Very early on, too, we set boundaries with our families, as far as like where they could get involved. He stood up for me one day with his mom. And again, that's very not cultural.
A lot of men will let their moms be too in control. My mom walked in one day and she saw me cooking. And she says, "Why are you cooking? She should cook." And I said, "I'm gonna cook. You have no idea everything she does, so I could take this on." And she never said a word again. Mm-hmm. She's respected it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Our family may well have lots of good advice to offer. Certainly, Nikki and I have benefited hugely over the years from our parents' advice in lots of different areas.
But a golden rule we eventually learnt for ourselves was this: never to decide on an important issue with one of our parents or wider family without having first discussed and agreed on the issue together ourselves. For example, we decided we wouldn't make a plan to go on holiday with them without having first agreed it with each other. We got that wrong on a number of occasions in the early years of our marriage. Not that we didn't enjoy being with them, but we realized we needed time on our own on holiday to have fun and strengthen our connection as a couple and with our own children.
Equally, it's been really important not to make financial arrangements and decisions with either of our parents without the other being fully informed and involved in the process. When we support one another and put in a right boundary, it gives us a great sense of emotional closeness, and it prevents family members from driving a wedge between us.
We were friends in college. She went away on a family holiday, and she came back and she brought presents for her friends. So that caught my attention that, she was a really generous person.
They had this thing in school where it was like a Monopoly challenge. And he kind of was the mastermind behind making it into an auction kind of game. Then I thought, oh, he's got brains.
So when we first came back to Malaysia from the UK, right, we had been married 6-7 years. And we went away as children. We came back as adults, plus a child.
We had been away for so long and we were used to just it being the two of us and making our own decisions without consulting anybody. All of a sudden, it was expected that we would inform family members of our movements, and we had a disagreement with his parents over our daughter and how we were bringing her up. We would maintain our respect, as in we wouldn't be nasty in any way. We would just carry on treating them the way we always treated them.
But, our philosophy is that, look, we are the parents, right? So you just have to let us do it the way we want to do it.
Some of our decisions, resulted in silent treatments that lasted anything from days to weeks.
What got us through that was carry on talking about it, figure out what the situation is, what needed dealing with.
But at the end of the day, it's like we were a unit, and we didn't want the parents to feel that they could get in between us and play us against one another. Yeah.
We suggest you take a few minutes now to look in your journal at the first conversation, current relationships, and talk about whatever wider family members you're relating to, whether that's your parents, if they're still alive, parents-in-law, step-parents, grown-up children, maybe children from a previous marriage, or your own brothers and sisters.
And talk about where these relationships are a source of strength for your marriage. Then see if you can identify anything that's causing tension. such as through unhealthy dependence between one of you and a family member, and what changes you could make. And for some people, these issues can be very emotional to discuss, so try to listen to each other without getting defensive so that you can work on these relationships together.
We're going to look at two ways in particular of working at and building healthy relationships with our wider family members, whoever that is. The first way is by doing what we can to resolve any conflict. Just as in marriage, unresolved hurt and anger lead to disconnection between husband and wife, as in the analogy of the blocked drain in the last session. So it is with our wider family. A relationship could have broken down or become strained while we were growing up, or since we've got married. Whichever it is, we can use the same process that we looked at in the last session for healing hurt.
So we need to start by identifying the issue. Talking about it with our partner, maybe for the first time, will help us to become clear about the main source of the tension. Where there's been hurt on either side, the other two parts of the process, saying sorry and forgiving, make healing the relationship possible.
Now, obviously, that's hard, especially with family, as our pride can so easily get in the way. But we have to do our part. It's so powerful when we take the initiative and say sorry or forgive where that's appropriate.
My mother-in-law and I had a great relationship, but from time to time over the years, we clashed and there was tension, or one or other of us said things that were hurtful. My mother-in-law, like me, was at the rhino end of the spectrum, and we both had very strong opinions about things. As a result, I have had to swallow my pride and apologize to her on many occasions. But I remember one occasion a few years back when we were staying with her, and she said something to me about my father, who was very unwell at the time, that really hurt and upset me. So much so that I just burst into tears and rushed out of the room and upstairs to our bedroom.
That left me with my mother, having to explain why Stella was so upset by what she said. It had occurred a number of times before, so I knew exactly why Stella had reacted as she did.
And the next thing I knew was she was knocking on our bedroom door, and very graciously she had come to apologize for upsetting me. Of course, I was touched that she had come to say sorry, but I struggled to forgive her, as I knew she still didn't really understand why I was so upset. So I sort of mumbled a thank you, but I knew I hadn't forgiven her. However, I had been running this course for long enough to know that if I didn't, it was going to spoil our relationship and probably affect my relationship with Nikki as well. Anyway, we left the next morning to return home, and for 2 weeks, I really didn't want to talk to her on the phone, but I knew I had to choose every day to forgive her in my heart and to let go of the hurt. And I found that really hard. But actually, talking to Nikki about the incident helped me to process the hurt I felt, and also asking God to help me forgive my mother-in-law made a massive difference. I knew eventually, when the hurt was healed, as I could phone her again, and we were absolutely fine.
When we've been hurt, it's only forgiveness that brings healing. And only we ourselves know if we're holding on to anger and resentment. If we have children, keeping our relationships right with our parents and in-laws will affect our children's relationships with their grandparents. Some grandparents may be playing a big part in caring for our children, in which case, keeping the lines of communication open with them, while resisting any kind of manipulation, will be important.
And a grandchild-grandparent relationship is unique and special, and we need to do all we can to make it as good as it can be. A second way of building these relationships with our wider family is to consider their needs. In any relationship, focusing on what irritates us about each other will push us apart, whereas focusing on each other's needs draws us together.
Inevitably, parents are at a different stage in life to us, and it's a great help to try to put ourselves into their shoes. Personally, Scylla and I have found it helpful when we've taken the initiative with our parents about things like visiting them, enabling them to see their grandchildren, working out what holidays we might spend together, and phoning them. I started a habit of phoning my mum every Saturday morning at 9:30, and it made a big difference to my relationship with her to have a regular time like this. The Bible's very clear. Honor your parents. That means respecting them, considering their needs and expressing our love for them. And this still applies after we're married.
When we become an adult, it means we're no longer responsible to our parents, but as they grow older, we become increasingly responsible for them. They'll need more of our support, and the moment might arrive when they are totally dependent on us, as we were once totally dependent on them.
David's mum got quite sick with meningitis, and it was quite a stressful time actually, and I was in a position where she lives about 3 hours away. I was in a position where I could take some time off work and just be at the hospital and look after her there, and then sort of go back in between her house and the hospital. It's really helped my relationship with her, because before we got married, she didn't seem that keen on me, really, and I know that that really just brought us closer together. It made a big difference.
We'd like you to take a few minutes now to look in your journal at the conversation supporting your parents. Discuss the needs of your parents and parents-in-law and how you might support them if they're still alive. And if they're not, how you might support other members of your wider family.
We're now going to explore what we bring with us into our marriage from our family background. Some people have had a very difficult and painful past, but when we look back to our childhood, most of us can generally find some good things about our upbringing. And we benefit from reflecting on and celebrating these healthy aspects of our family backgrounds together.
And during this session, you may well discover things about your partner's family that you didn't know before. Becoming aware of the differences between us in terms of our backgrounds will help us in our marriage. Every family has its own unique way of doing things. And we may well come into marriage either having decided that we're going to do things completely differently to what we observed growing up, or thinking that the way our family has always done things is the best and right way.
I was raised in a very set way. You were raised in a different way. And
it was all very much, right, what's this bit of cutlery for? What's that bit of cutlery for? And I got it all wrong. I was just straight in there with a knife and the honey, getting the bread croissant crumbs in there.
The way my parents did it was my mum served you your food. And at his house, so the plate was in front of me and I just waited and it was like, ready, steady, go. I looked and it's like the food had gone.
In my house, when someone was ill, it was a big thing. Everybody would take a day off. I would get a chicken soup and peeled oranges waiting for me at any time. Whereas in Michael's family, everybody would be like, oh, you're fine, just get on with it.
Being hospitable was a done thing. That's how I grew up.
That was my first introduction to opening up my home, which also means by default opening up your life to other people. It's not something that's come naturally for me. We've had to have, pretty long, serious conversations along the way.
I think definitely the first few years, it is a bit of a whirlwind of it feels like you have married each other's families almost. When we first got married, Christmases needed a bit of negotiation.
I just presumed everybody did Christmas the way that we did Christmas.
Yeah.
That was actually really helpful to go, oh, this isn't normal for you. I just presumed that my way was the best way.
Addressing issues about our background means we'll understand better where each other is coming from, and then work together to create our own unique marriage culture. In order to do that, we want to take a few minutes to explore what a healthy upbringing looks like, so that we can measure our own against that.
Even as we begin, painful memories may be starting to surface, but we want to encourage you not to be anxious about looking back.
It's important to recognize any negative patterns from our upbringing so that we don't perpetuate them in our marriage and pass them on to the next generation. Even the deepest pain can be healed. And we've seen how so often marriage itself is the vehicle through which healing comes.
Many psychologists, since the groundbreaking research of John Bowlby in 1958 and the further developments by Mary Ainsworth and others in the 1970s, have recognized that children as they grow up need their home to be two things. First, a secure base from which to explore the world, and secondly, a safe haven to which they return. Being allowed enough independence to explore within safe limits is vital for a child's growth and development. Our home and our parents should act as the secure base from which we set out. But as a child, we also need a safe haven to which we could return, to sort out our emotions, whether that was of frustration, anger, fear, disappointment, or sadness, and where our emotional tank could be filled up again with comfort, affection, encouragement, and reassurance that we had a parent who was there for us.
Our son Benj recently sent us a short video clip of him, his wife, and their 4 young children on a long deserted beach. And we realized we were watching this diagram happening in front of our eyes. Tamsin, our daughter-in-law, had made a base with a rug, a lounger, a picnic basket and a tent, with their 2-year-old close by. While Benj was filming, the children came running back to Tamsin with shells they'd found to add to a collection. They'd have a quick word and then set off again on their adventure looking for more. The setup with Tamsin acted as the safe haven for them to come back to, where, if necessary, their emotional tanks could be topped up, and the secure base from which to set off again.
And this concept of the family we grew up in being a safe place where we developed a healthy approach to life and to relationships is then what we seek to replicate in our marriage. A safe place where we know we belong, where our emotional needs are met, where we're able to build a relationship of trust and intimacy, and from which we go out into the world.
What we know from thousands of studies of children and parents and how they interact over the last 50 years, the basic need that children have is to feel safe with their parents and to know that on a very basic emotional level, they can call to their parents, turn to them, and have their parents pay attention and respond and come to them, comfort them, support them, help them with their emotions. It's like the parents are there as a safe haven for the child, and that makes the world a safer place for that child. When we haven't had secure connection as children, we're more sensitive, we're more easily hurt, we have more negative expectations of relationships. In the Hold Me Tight education program, we call them raw spots, and we help couples pinpoint and talk about their raw spots. I don't want people to feel that if they haven't had any kind of secure connection when they were young, that somehow love is a closed book for them, because it's not true. Marriage or falling in love is kind of like a new chance, I think. We feel stronger, we're more sure of ourselves, we believe in ourselves, we're not so scared to go out into the world, we take risks. When you have this connection, your relationship grows, it becomes a safe place, and you can support each other, and then you grow.
Where our upbringing failed to provide enough freedom to explore and a safe place to return to, it can leave us with buried anger that may then come out against our husband or wife. A good friend of ours, Miles, told us a story from his childhood that illustrates how our upbringing can affect the ways we relate to each other in our marriage, sometimes without us realizing it. Miles grew up in Canada. When he went to primary school just before his 6th birthday, his English mum decided to dress him up in a uniform.
She got me these smart gray shorts, black shoes, a tie, and even a little jumper. And she had to drag me to school, kicking and screaming and yelling and crying. As I suspected, all the other children were dressed in jeans and normal clothes. I was picked on and bullied and pushed around, and I came home from this first day utterly miserable, with my uniform just filthy. And this went on for a few days. Finally, she got the message and she relented. I was able just to wear normal clothes to school. My mom continued, though, to exert a strong influence over my clothing. The worst occasion was when I was 15 and I was visiting her in a hospital where she was terminally ill with lung cancer. And she asked me, "What are you doing this weekend?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to a party." And she said, "What are you going to wear?" So I told her jeans, and she said, no, you can't wear jeans. Anyway, I just started arguing with her, had this huge row. I left, came back the next day, and she said, "I've got something for you." And I said, "What?" And she gets this bag and pulls out of this bag a pair of acid yellow corduroy elephant trousers. I knew she meant well, but on the other hand, how could I wear such a ridiculous outfit? I felt I had no choice. She responded that I did have a choice and produced an even more hideous pair of green trousers. Basically, I finally just realized, look, how can you disobey your dying mother? When my mom actually passed away a few months later, I was shocked that my first reaction wasn't sadness, but it was relief. I thought, now I don't have anyone to tell me what to do anymore. I knew I should have been grieving, and I started to think that there was something wrong with me. Now, early in my marriage to Deborah, she'd be maybe giving me directions while I was driving, or suggest something to wear, or give me some suggestions while I was cooking, and I would just explode with rage. And on the marriage course, I started to see that all of this was just this automatic reaction to my mother. I thought Deborah was trying to control me when in fact she wasn't. And it was an opportunity to start healing hurt from the past and to forgive my mom. And Deb, really helped me. We did this together, and it felt wonderful, to go through this healing process with her. And so now I ask her for advice on what to wear, and she sometimes buys me beautiful clothes. I'm not perfect. I still react, when Deb gives me directions or tells me how to cook something, but it's much less frequently and with a lot less anger. And I think she's quite relieved that the smoldering volcano has died down.
Our relationship can be adversely affected by our background, but our marriage can also be the place where we change and where we're healed of our past.
It starts with becoming aware of why we overreact when our partner touches a raw spot. These are sensitivities that are rooted in our upbringing and that impact our relationship today.
Now, for some people, it's becoming aware that they lacked a role model in their upbringing of what a healthy marriage looks like, and they feel uncertain about how to build a strong and intimate marriage themselves.
I grew up as an only child, and my mum passed away when I was about 14, and then I had a very difficult relationship with my dad because he suffered badly with depression. But I think with that, a load of walls kind of went up for me. And so getting married was kind of this big thing of trying to let Andy in and even getting engaged. And I think that took a long time to really, for my walls to come down, for me to really trust you. And I think I would get very easily hurt by you. When he hurt me, it was like huge. So he'd say one small thing, but for me it was like a nuclear bomb. Like saying, oh, you shouldn't be late, like, why are you saying that about me? And I just take everything as a huge personal critique. And I think I'd had a slight expectation of, because a lot of people close in my life had maybe either passed away or had in some ways let me down, that there was that, for me, slight testing of him, is he going to do the same? So I remember times when we'd fall out, and this was when we were dating, and I'd kick you out the house and he'd stay outside for like 2-3 hours. And I bet you eroded slowly just by being persistent. I think being forgiving, being kind, being patient with me as I kind of processed all these things.
I don't think we had like a light bulb moment when everything changed. I think it was probably like persistent conversations and like a slow breaking down of walls, a slow building up of trust.
Please turn to the conversation in your journal, reflecting on your upbringing. We want you to spend a few minutes drawing a diagram of your immediate family members around the circle me to represent these relationships as you were growing up, and include any family members who've died. If you had a relationship with a member of your family, make the circles touch. If you were very close, overlap the circles. If there was no relationship, separate them. You'll see the example in your journal. This is someone who has a close relationship with her mum and sister, so the circles overlap. Let's say her parents were divorced and there's no relationship between them, so the circles aren't touching. She has some relationship with her father, but isn't close to him, and she has no relationship to her brother. The aim of this is to create for yourselves a visual picture of the quality of relationships in your family as you are growing up and now.
I remember one couple saying that the husband had his circles all overlapping, while the wife's circles were spread out all over the page. And seeing the contrast helped them understand the reason for their two very different family dynamics. Now, don't spend too long doing that. When you've finished, turn to the next two parts of the conversation. Your parents or step-parents or whoever were your main caregivers' relationship with you, and then your parents or step-parents or whoever brought you up, relationship with each other, and mark the relevant boxes. When you've done that, look at what each other has put and discuss it together. We recognise that the conversation you've just had is much harder and more complicated for some people than for others. Perhaps you've focused on things from your upbringing that cause painful memories. And we want to encourage you that healing childhood pain is possible. We're not fixed into patterns of behaviour by our past.
We'd also suggest getting expert help if you know this is a challenging area for you. We've talked to many couples where one or both of them have had very difficult backgrounds, who've built and go on building a very strong and secure marriage. Their marriage has become that secure base and safe haven for adventure and security.
We want to focus for the last part of this session on two practical steps for addressing pain from childhood. These steps apply whether that's for yourself or for your partner. There may be something major that's obviously affecting one of you, or it may be something quite small that you haven't voiced before. And you may need your partner's help to recognize areas that you're blind to out of loyalty to a parent. We want to encourage you to be sensitive and gentle in how you do this.
The first step is to grieve our own and our partner's unmet needs, where a parent or parents have failed us. We may never have admitted, even to ourselves, the hurt we've experienced, and doing so is a huge step forward.
Grief is a process that implies there's been loss. Applying the word grief to an early childhood, it could be a missed childhood. There are some children who never really had a childhood. They just had to grow up very quickly. So there's that loss of a childhood. But the thing to remember is that grief has different stages and it's a process. So as a partner, make sure you communicate to your partner who's been hurt that you respect them and you trust them and they can trust you, so they can open up and share their hurts, which they may never have shared with anybody else ever, and they may have buried as children. If as a partner they see you as being understanding, non-judgmental, supportive, they would hopefully get to the point where they feel they can share some really deep hurts. So with the healing process, there might be stops and starts, and you just keep walking alongside them, holding them by the hand, literally or metaphorically, and just encouraging them and telling them they can do it.
It's helpful to recognize that recovery is a process with which we can help our partner. Marriage can either make the sadness we feel from our past worse or help to heal it. If your husband or wife has unmet childhood needs, it's so important that you seek to understand them and give them the gift of your emotional support as they walk the sometimes long road of recovery. This draws us together as a couple.
非常想跟别人建立健康的关系，被父母忽略的孩子，和缺失父母双方或者是缺失其中一方的孩子，他们在后来人生成长过程中间，的确会遇到一些困难。比如说他们可能会去寻找补偿，或者如果情况比较麻烦的话，他们可能就需要得到专业的帮助，使他们能够意识到过去自己的缺失，以及这种缺失对他们后来跟人建立关系意味着什么。当他们进入了婚姻，我想有2个方面使他们能够慢慢的经历成长和做出改变和建立新型的关系。第一个方面就是他们夫妻双方能够彼此都意识到，在他成长的过程中间有这样一种空缺，有这样一种缺失，有这样被忽略的经历，这是第一步。第二步就是给他们足够的关怀、足够的支持、足够的满足。因为非常容易造成的一个麻烦就是那些造成过缺失、经历过缺失的孩子、被忽略的孩子，他们会要求得到完美的补偿，希望对方对他们的关怀啊、对他们的支持、对他们的爱是完美的。那么在这一点上，他们的配偶、对方就要帮助他们意识到说，我不是你的父母，我不是你缺乏的那个父母我跟你一样是一个个体，我们要一起建立新的关系，使我们在新的关系里边得到满足。
The second step is to forgive. Forgiveness is essential for healing and for dealing with buried anger from our past. As we said in the last session, forgiveness is an act of the will. We may not feel like it, but it's the only way to be set free. And if we've been deeply hurt, the forgiveness needs to be an ongoing process each time the pain resurfaces.
And as we keep forgiving, the memories will gradually have less and less power over us. Whether or not our parents have changed or indeed even recognise how they've hurt us, we need to choose to forgive. A friend of ours shared her story with us. I had a stepfather named John. My mother married him when I was 7 and divorced him when I was 15. The application for divorce was made on the grounds of mental cruelty. My childhood was a nightmare. My biggest wish was to grow up as quickly as possible to get away from the situation. I am now 33. I've carried the burden of these memories and the hate around for 18 years, despite becoming a committed Christian 2 years ago. It was the one part of my life that was simply a no-go area. I was desolate. How could I possibly forgive John for what he'd done? Where would be the justice in that? I was the child, I was the victim. I hadn't seen him since I was 15. He wasn't even asking for forgiveness. I began to see that I needed to deal with this once and for all. Unless I wanted 18 years to turn to 28, 38, 48 with no end. I prayed, lay awake for several nights, cried and prayed some more. Then I wrote John a letter, forgiving him for the hurt and anguish I'd experienced as a child in his care. As I wrote, I had no idea if he was even aware of the impact that that part of his life had had on mine. I decided to leave that part up to God. But I knew as I sent the letter that I had been set free.
It's important to remember that forgiving someone is not condoning their actions or giving them the right to repeat what they've done. Forgiveness is about being set free from the ways they've hurt you. We subsequently heard that her stepfather made contact with her. He was unable to see the damage he caused her or why he needed her forgiveness. But despite the fact that they didn't reconcile, she still experienced complete freedom from the pain he'd caused her.
Circumstances may mean we're unable to express forgiveness directly to the person who's let us down. But we can still choose to forgive in order to be set free from the hurt and the pain that have built up inside us over time.
Unforgiveness hurts only us. Buried hurt can feel like your 2 hands are full of sand, and the sand can feel heavy with the pain, the injustice, the unresolved anger. Forgiveness is like opening your hands, your fingers, and allowing the sand to run through. Then you're free to act like that secure base and safe haven for each other in your marriage.
If you're carrying hurt from your upbringing, we want to provide an opportunity now, if you'd like to extend forgiveness towards the person or the people who hurt you as a way of starting this process of being set free. A good way is to imagine that the person who's hurt you is standing in front of you, and you may like to close your eyes for a moment. Say silently, Mum, Dad, use whatever term you normally use or the name of whoever it is who's hurt you. You've caused me to feel like this through what you did or failed to do. Express silently what you feel hurt by. But as an act of my will, I choose to forgive you now. Imagine you're holding what's been within you, the pain you've been carrying from your childhood, and like the sand, you're letting it go, not holding on to it any longer. And as you forgive, you're letting it fall to the ground in order to be set free.
Then, if you're comfortable praying, you could echo this prayer silently in your heart. Lord, thank you for your unconditional love for me and your willingness to forgive me freely. Please help me to forgive those who've hurt me. Please pour your love into my heart by your Spirit so that I can be set free and no longer burdened by hurt and unforgiveness. Thank you that you give your spirit of love to all those who ask you. Amen.
We want to give you a few minutes together now to comfort your partner if they've been carrying hurt from their childhood. If this is a hard area for your partner to address, ask them what's the most painful part for you, and then reflect back whatever they tell you. You're not fixing it, you're not trying to solve anything, you're simply showing them you're with them, so that they know they're not alone.
And then we'd suggest you finish this session by asking your partner for one way you could support them going forwards. And if you're both comfortable praying, please do so either aloud or silently. If not, express your support in some other way.
We'd like to close now with a final prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for your continued love for each one of us. And thank you for all the good things that we've received from our families. And we pray that you would help us as we seek to build the best relationships we can with them. And we pray where a family background has affected a marriage, that you would give love, understanding, and gentleness between husband and wife. And where there's been deep hurt, you'd give fresh hope for the future. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. This session may well have brought up a lot of issues that you haven't had time to process. We'd encourage you to continue to talk together to help each other to move forwards.
Thank you for joining us, and see you on the next session.
Taking my face oil. Oh, that's great.
I'll finish this. Wrap this up. Quite good. No, can I say something now, please?
Literally, all I've eaten for the last 12 hours is sweets.
I mean, also, do you want to say something?
All the time.
7, take 6. Mark?
No, yeah.
What? That's New York.
Because
our mobile phones.
Speaking of which.
Cross-examination, counselor.
Cut.